When I experience an obstacle or challenge, I'm going to move past it. I'm going to shatter that glass ceiling and I'm going to keep going.
It hurts to smash a glass ceiling.
Wow, we literally have to be superheroes to walk through this life.
While I might have been the first, I pray that I'm not the last.
Okay, here we are. Purnima, welcome to Taking Her Lead.
Thank you so much, Josh. Thank you for having me on this show today.
Absolutely. And as you know, but our audience doesn't know, you and I just wrestled through for about a half an hour to dial in all the
Yes.
details and the settings for this new streaming service we're using. So
True, that's the whole fun of it, right?
Yes, exactly. So I want to thank you on behalf of all of our listeners and our viewers. So for wrestling through with me. Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
I did ask this earlier, but I know everyone wants to know, how is your day going?
Day's awesome. Like I said, mornings are pretty cool. The organization that I represent, Marlabs, most of our clients are in the US, so we pretty much wake up to US times. So my day's actually starting to begin right now as we speak,
Yeah.
and we'll go on for a few hours from now. But yeah, day's been good. Thank you, and I hope yours has been too. We're just starting your day, right?
Just
It's
starting out.
early,
Yeah,
really
it's quite
early for
early.
you.
Yeah, about 5:30 my time, but that's okay.
Wow.
Yeah, my 3 boys get me up very early every morning, and so this is okay. I'm used to it. Yeah, and so just for a little bit of context, does your schedule then shift a little bit on Tuesday? Does it dial back to earlier your time? How does that look for
Yes.
you?
Yes. So, it's I would say it's a 50-50. Typically, 5 p.m. to about 8:39 is usually busy.
Mhm.
But then, we have our good days and bad days. There are some days that go on forever, and then some days that are not so bad. But that's
Yeah,
okay because I think it's the order of the day, and meetings are the order of the day in the kind of situation that we are in.
sure.
And I think
Yeah.
now we're looking forward to meetings. Honestly, every time somebody puts their video on, I'm happy to see the face. We've been so used to not seeing people and faces that it's a welcome change.
I can't agree more. I've done some presentations, and many people, for a variety of reasons, will have their video off, and it's
Yeah,
so hard. It's so hard to talk, and you don't have
yeah.
any feedback. So
I
this is a delight in comparison. I agree.
agree.
So yeah. So if you would tell us just a little bit about what you do currently, that would be fabulous.
Sure. So I currently head marketing. I'm the CMO for an organization called Marlabs. We
Hmm.
are a digital agency, and it's really exciting time for me here because the organization is in the midst of a huge transformation, not only for our own clients but internally. And I think it's a huge opportunity for me and for most of the folks who work there to be able to be part of this journey and see how we can, translate our organization and bring in a new energy and really challenge ourselves to be better every day. And I think that's the fun of it. There's a fun part of working for an organization that's looking to change and be relevant.
That sounds really exciting.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. It
Can you
is.
talk? Can you talk at all about some of the initiatives within that? Some of the things that Marlabs is looking at doing?
Certainly. So, I think the whole the approach was that, while we are looking at transforming our clients, it's really not, it's going to be a lot more of lip service unless we do that ourselves. And so
Hmm.
the entire organization has, right from, whether it's finance or HR or marketing, we've looked across the leadership to really translate our functions into far more digitally competent,
Hmm.
digitally dexterous organization, which means that across board we are looking at tools and applications and platforms that not only enhance productivity and enhance collaboration, but also bring about a lot of change when it comes to knowledge sharing. So, one part of the organization knows in real time what the other part of the organization is doing. And I think that's very critical when we are transforming, which means that we're changing as we speak. And
Hmm.
therefore, all of that, when we put it together, is how we would define transformation. But at the same time, it's very difficult. It's not easy for any of us to change, and you know. even for me, I think it's a lot of unlearning and relearning a lot of things. But what's exciting for me, honestly, Josh, is that a lot of my previous roles, while I was continuing to be the CMO, had a lot of marketing as such. It was all about marketing. It was all about being relevant to the sales. It was all about being more closer to the clients.
Sure.
While a lot of that continues to be in my current role, it's also more about creating a brand for us as employees. It's about
Yeah.
creating opportunities for women within the organization. It's
Mhm.
about enabling people to do more beyond their current job roles and make them more relevant for future. While I can't do it, but we create opportunities, and we look at providing I would say platforms for people to come up and upskill themselves, which includes myself and my team as well.
Mhm.
So I think that's really what we're trying to do in a short period of time.
That's big.
It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pain, but I think it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, that's fabulous. How large is Marlabs, may I ask? How many employees?
We are roughly about close to 4,000 employees.
Mhm.
But that's really a reflection of how digitized we are. Because if I were to look at organizations, the kind of revenues that we have, they would employ a lot more people, probably twice the number of people, which obviously means we're a lot more digital. We are, our people are that much more productive. And so I think it's a fair benchmark to say that, we are well on our path to being even more digital than we are today.
That's fabulous. So it sounds like the culture within Marlabs is one that lends itself to a certain degree toward this change, toward enacting improvement
Oh
in every
yes.
sector.
Oh yes. And I think the culture is all of us. I mean, each and every one of us at Marlabs. And I think if it's about us wanting to change. Otherwise, you can never thrust the change on someone, right? It's all of us wanting the change. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's, really what makes it more fun, because everyone's in it for the long haul.
yeah. That's just fabulous. Now, can you talk just briefly? What does Marlabs do?
Sure. So, like I mentioned, we are in the space where we provide digital solutions for our clients. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is essentially we work with a lot of Fortune 500 and Fortune 2000 clients in the healthcare and finance and supply and all of that. And essentially, when it comes to applying tools and platforms that enhance their customer experience, that enhance their infrastructure, that cloudize or digitize their infrastructure, we're there to help them go through that entire transformation. And what makes us different is that we do not. I'm sorry, I'm sounding like a
No,
brand ambassador for Marlabs. That's.
we want to know. We want to know. Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you for the opportunity. So really, what Marlabs does is not only provide those solutions, but I think we take a step back. We go through with a very focused design thinking approach, which means that it's not just about the problems that our clients state. We also look for underlying reasons as to why that problem exists. And then when we go back with the solution,
Mm,
it's not just about the particular situation that the client
yeah,
has explained, but it could be a whole host of other underlying problems that the client may not be aware of, or may be aware of but wants to do it in phases. So we kind of be with them through the entire journey. And
interesting.
that's essentially, in a nutshell, what we do. Our focus is largely in the US, and we work with some really cool names, I would say, in the healthcare and financial services industry.
That's fabulous. So it sounds like, to a certain degree, just to make sure I understand what you're saying, that you'll work on specific problems and finding specific solutions, but then your teams are thinking systemically as well. What are the operators, in a variety of ways that are driving this problem that could be driving other problems as well and other challenges within the organization.
Exactly.
Do you find that the organizations, your clients, are pretty receptive to the system thinking as well, the broader, oh, by the way, client, you have an issue over here that is happening because of this? Do they seem pretty receptive to that generally?
Josh,
'Cause-
it's a mixed bag. I think where we have excellent client relationships, which is, all thanks to our sales and our client-facing groups. I
yeah.
think the opportunities are much more, and it's a lot easier. Where it's a relationship that is being very new, we are cautious because we
Sure.
don't want to overwhelm everybody with, a whole host of things. But we definitely point out possibilities that this is what you could do. And I think a lot of times those conversations also work well for us because they do really see that it's just not a transactional approach or it's not a transactional solution that we're providing, but we're really thinking through. And I think that definitely works in our favor. But yes, it takes time for clients who don't know us to warm up to us, and that's the whole process of how we engage with them across different leadership or across different functions.
That's good.
So,
That's
yeah.
good business. Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fabulous. Well, let's dive in a little bit. Thank you so much for giving us that context for what you do. And
thank you for the opportunity, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Let's dive in a little bit more to you. And as I always ask, one of my first questions is, let's go back in time, if you will,
Okay.
and talk about some experiences that you had when you were much younger, and influences that you had that set the trajectory that you have for your life to a certain degree. And you can start when you were very young or adolescent. It's completely up to you.
All right. So
so
we moved. No, that's, there's so many things running in your head, and you just want to make sure that it's the right way that I'm sharing. But I will start with at the beginning, probably when I was 6 or 7. The first part of my life I spent in a place called Calcutta, which is in West Bengal. That's east of India, just for your reference. Very laid back, very calm. It's one of those. It's like it's a place like Italy where people take siesta in the afternoon. It's very, very laid back. Yeah. And my father got his transfer to New Delhi, which is the capital of India. And New Delhi is in the north of India. It's the heartland of North India. And culturally, they couldn't be more different. Those two states don't speak the same language. While Calcutta is very laid back, New Delhi and north of India is very aggressive, very dynamic. And so as a 6-year-old, the first shift I had to make was communication, because I only knew Bengali, which is spoken in Calcutta. Of course, I knew English. But when I came to New Delhi, Bengali doesn't work, and English, maybe they think I'm a little snooty. So I had to learn Hindi in a very short span of time. Wow. And I think that's where I picked up the flair for languages, and I'll talk a little bit about it later on. But it was essential for me to learn the language immediately, because I couldn't go out to play, because nobody would allow me to play with themselves, because I didn't know the language. So it was very easy. But as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, picking up languages it comes naturally. It's not that,
it's faster.
It's much faster. It's much faster. So I obviously picked up the language very, very quickly. But I would say a lot of the credit to a lot of the experiences that helped me shape my I would say premeditation towards communication or marketing was thanks to my father. My father was very, very encouraging of my sister and I. So we had family of 4: my sister, myself, my mom and dad. And my father was very encouraging of the 2 of us to pick up arts, to pick up music, to pick up dancing. And so he encouraged us early on to pick up a classical dance from the state of my Kerala, which is my home state. And and Delhi being the capital state, there was a lot of opportunity for us to experience cultures, specifically to not just to India but outside. So while I continued my dancing, we used to have these various festivals, like cross-cultural festivals. So the one that I remember was about 9 or 10. I remember we had the festival of USSR. I mean, USSR was still a federation of states. It had not split up. Sure. So I remember my dad taking me there and my sister there. And, we came to know many of the states like Georgia and Latvia. I mean, so it just opened up a whole spectrum of cultural possibilities that as a child that I thought was very enriching for me and my sister. Similarly, my father used to work for an Italian organization. So a lot of things from Italy would come in. I'll give you an example. I'm talking about the 80s, where we didn't have the internet. There was very little understanding of cultures outside of India. And my father comes one day and he says, I'm going to make ravioli for you. And we had no clue what a ravioli was. And he goes, and we didn't have ricotta cheese, nothing of that sort. So he takes up, the local brand of cheese that we get in India, which is Amul cheese. And he cuts up some spinach, and, he takes the flour and butter. And
he does it.
He did it, and we were so proud that, oh, we're eating ravioli, and I had no clue what this was. It was much later that I came to know that, oh yes, it's a dish from Italy. So dad introduced
That's so
us.
fun.
Yes,
What
it
a
is.
great guy. We need to get him on the
He
show.
was. He
Oh,
was.
we
Unfortunately,
should.
passed
I'm
almost
very
12
sorry.
years ago. But yes,
Oh,
so I would, while mom was a very strong, rock solid support to my father, I think he was the one who took us to a lot of these experiences. And again, another experience was, he pushed us. Well, I wouldn't say he pushed us, but he encouraged us to do a lot of these competitions, like in, essay writing and debating and skills of a nature when we were in school. And I remember my sister and I coming back with tons of medals because we just enjoyed that whole experience. So I think he was, genuinely wanted us to experience beyond the school life, and he in his way, in his very unique, and I would say very encouraging way, he did give us a lot of opportunities. And it was not as if money was tight and we were this average middle class Indian family trying to just make a living there in Delhi and all of that. And that was the only breadwinner, so it was tight. But I think in all that, he definitely just gave us so many opportunities. And I think somewhere the cultural infusions, and the fact that I was speaking at a lot of competitions, so communication came very naturally to me. And I think that sort of guided, probably unconsciously, not consciously, because I did toy with finance at some point in life and decided that is not my cup of tea. uh, and then moved into marketing. So I would say that I could go on and on, but I
no,
would say
that's
those would be some of the very early influences in school and all of that that helped me just understand myself and the world around us in a significantly more enriching light than an average maybe 7, 8, or 9-year-old. Yeah.
yeah. And it sounds like to me that your father, he was of a broad perspective,
Very.
inclusive perspective. He wanted to open up your eyes, that those of
Yes.
you and your
Yes.
sibling, and broaden what your experiences. So that's not every parent is like that. And being a parent can be very challenging, and to be able to take that extra step
Yes.
and open things up that's a big deal. Kudos to
Yes,
him.
I would say yes. I mean, we didn't realize at that time, Josh, and we were like doing it because our dad was taking us to so many things and we enjoyed it. But I think subconsciously for my sister and I, at least for myself, a lot of the experiences, I would say, remain like, this ravioli incident. It remains with me even now. He made so many dishes after that, but this is one piece of Italy I remember because it was such an exotic dish. So I think there were those very fun moments, and he definitely made it a lot of fun. He was a fun-loving person, and he definitely wanted his daughters to, have a very broad experience, I would say. And I think being in New Delhi accorded it because, like I said, it's a capital city, and there's a lot of culture. It's like a potpourri of cultural infusions. We had people from every state coming in. India's got this huge multicultural, ethos, and so we were able to experience all that, Josh. And yeah, that's it. Definitely credit goes to my dad, and of course my mom, because she continued to support us. And we had to do all these things post our school, and she would just make sure that everything was ready so that we could go and we could have all these competitions done and come back.
What was one of your favorite things to do as a kid?
Oh, I loved playing. So I was to wait for my school to get over. And we in New Delhi was this place of, like, I miss it, and I think a lot of the youngsters miss it today. But we had huge gardens and huge
Mm,
places to play, and it was
mhm.
designated areas in New Delhi, especially the place where I was staying, with these huge gardens. So we would come back at 2 o'clock, and I would just barely gulp down lunch, and I would have these calls from my the neighbors' kids, and we would just go off to play, and we would be
Oh,
like
yeah.
sweating it out for 4, 5 hours. And till my mom would come back and say, she would be calling us from the balcony and the veranda and say, hey, you have to come and do your homework. And I used to be never doing my homework on time. I remember, I would never have my homeworks done. And I would go the next day morning and somebody would say, oh, did you do the math homework? No, I didn't. That's certain copy stuff. But yeah, but childhood is a lot of fun playing, a lot of friends, a lot of, I would say, physical sports, and a lot of that, which again continue to stay with me, for. But I definitely remember all the hanging out we did with us as a family, going out for these little picnics in Delhi, and So those were like fond memories of us as a family. And then, life was less complicated. It was, yeah, just a fun school girl life.
That's great. Now, fast forward just briefly here. Do you do any sport now?
Yes, I used to for a few years do something called CrossFit, which is pretty
Mhm.
intense.
Yeah.
And I realized that I'm a little too old to do that, in the sense that you get very competitive when you start lifting weights, and then suddenly your shoulder goes off. But it was
Yeah.
fun because things that I'd seen in TV, like Olympics, like snatch
Mhm.
and clean and jerk, and these were terms which I never thought I would do. And it was fun to do that, but with very less like light
Mhm.
weights. And then I never thought in my life I would do a handstand. So I learned how to handstand. So I think I'm pretty late in life. So, but it was fun.
Wow. I think
So
I
it
would
was,
break in two if I did a handstand.
no, it took me a lot of time, honestly, Josh. But when I got it, I couldn't stop showing off. And I think I would have put my pictures on my Facebook everywhere, just telling people
Yeah,
I could handstand.
it's
But off
inspiring.
late, off late, yeah, I just stick to running, and because of COVID, obviously one can't hit the gym and things like that. So I just
Sure.
have light weights, and I just make sure I get my 60 minutes every day.
That's that's huge that you can do that and carve that time out. So many people struggle to do that, especially during COVID,
Yeah,
where people
yeah.
have had to shift what they do. So that wow, and the endorphins and the health that it
Yes.
brings to run all the time.
I think
Um,
that keeps, I think that's what's kept me a little bit of, brought my sanity intact during COVID.
yeah,
That you can at least sweat it out. And even if you're feeling frustrated, if you just go out for a quick run or run on the treadmill, it just calms you and you feel
yeah,
better.
changes your perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, immediately. Well, let's move forward a little bit and into adolescence and perhaps in school and college and when you were a young professional, that whole range. What were some, as we always, Jeannie and I always say, pivotal moments that really kind of steered your opportunities and your perspective on where to go next?
Wow, I think there are lots of pivotal moments, but I think there was, I'll start with my the teenage piece, because most of us, at least in India, during that phase when we were growing up, there were really two career choices. You either became an engineer or you became a doctor, and which meant that you had you had to take up science. The other careers were unheard of.
Interesting.
So after I finished my 10th, and I was having this chat with my mom, and I said, Mom, I don't think I'm going to want to be an engineer or doctor. So what do you want to do? I said, I want to do something with writing, something with communication. But I was pretty sure that I didn't want to do the usual route. And even though I had scored great marks and my teacher said, hey, why are you doing that? I shifted. So I think that was one shift that I made,
Hmm.
consciously knowing my strengths and knowing my weaknesses, that I knew that I would probably not be such a great science student,
Hmm.
but I'd
Hmm.
probably excel a bit more at others. So I think that was one.
How old were you at
Um,
that point?
yeah, probably 14, 15,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
finish, that's when, at 15, you take your step towards senior school, or
Hmm.
we call it high school.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that was like probably the interesting moment for me. And life kind of played well for me, because I got into some of the best universities, and I thought that that was like an endorsement for the choice that I'd made.
Hmm.
And again, I deliberately, like, while most of my peers in the universities were going to do their MBAs and were picking up really fancy careers at banks, because in India, like, you could start your first banking role, and your designation would be associate vice president. But at that
Interesting.
point, when we were very young, being an associate vice president at 23 was a big deal. It's a big deal. So a lot of my friends and my peers in colleges were picking up jobs at banks, and I was very clear that that's not what I wanted to do, and I wanted to be part of an advertising agency.
Hmm.
So that was another pivotal moment for me, where I did work for a few years in an advertising agency, and roughly a little, probably 2, 3 years from then was when we were moving into 2000. So, the
Hmm.
whole Y2K and everything. And one of the things I realized is that um, there was no, uh, Indian IT services or Indian IT was just starting to boom into 2000.
Hmm.
I mean, these terms about us being the silicon capital of India, Bangalore being all of that. I think
Yeah.
that came in much later, but early 2000 was really when this boom was happening slowly. And I realized that if I had to invest somewhere, then probably I would like to do marketing for IT. And I think that's when I made a conscious shift from going to an advertising agency. And then a lot of people said, "What, you're doing so well at the agency and you have fun. It's a completely different vibe. IT is going to be so boring, and you have to pick up a lot of stuff which is not your cup of tea and all of that." But I think that was another decisive shift that I made, where early 2000s I joined an IT firm, and then I've stuck to IT all through my life.
Can I ask what drew you to IT?
I think it was just the opportunity, to be very honest, Josh. India was just, like I said, India during the times that I was growing up, the opportunity for jobs were very limited. You either worked in a bank, you were an engineer, you were a doctor, and all of that. Marketing, that people would ask my father, why is she taking up marketing? What is she going to do in marketing and things like that? People had to warm up to that. But I probably saw that as an opportunity because in the early 2000s, the Indian IT companies were just starting to come up. And I think for me, I just saw that as I would say, an area where probably I could lend my expertise, though I was still a youngster. It was not mature, I would say, but I thought it was an opportunity for me to expand my understanding. Even though honestly, I was not an IT person. I had no prior experience of technology. And to be very honest, I was not very technology driven. Like, even today, I'm very messy with my phone and things like that. But I think it's just as a career opportunity that I saw, to be very honest. And I would say no regrets.
Good call.
Because I think, yeah. So
what informed that decision? Because that really was quite pivotal, and almost as though it was you foresaw what was coming ahead of time.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't give myself the Nostradamus kind of.
No.
And no. I think it was just a gut that this was a place where I was seeing a lot of movement from India to the US. A lot of engineers were going, and the companies were expanding. We were seeing a lot of centers being set up in India. So in general, when a sector booms, you hear about it. So up until then, it was manufacturing, it was constructions of these. When I grew up, it was big dams and big infrastructure that was getting. And then as I grew up, as I moved into my working journey, it was technology that was, a lot of companies were coming. Nokia was coming into India. So I think when I saw this influx, I felt that, they're definitely taking all these decisions because there is opportunity. And so why not cash in on that opportunity and see where it takes me? And I wasn't deviating from what I was doing. I was still going to be doing marketing. I was still going to be doing advertising and communication. It's just that I decided that would be the industry that I would like to try my luck. And I was always sure that if I didn't, if I wouldn't make it, I knew that I could always get back into being part of an agency because I still had those skills. But somehow I enjoyed it so much that I stuck around for the next 20 years.
And we are grateful that you did, and so many other people are as well. Absolutely. Yeah. Did you I find it really interesting that earlier when you decided, when you were 14, 15 years old, and you decided, I don't want to do the normal thing. And I'm making an assumption that the input of your parents prior to that in broadening your perspective and being inclusive of what you might be interested in helped with that. Did you experience any pressure from peers or from other adults or teachers toward you need to do what everybody else is doing? How did that look?
Oh, yes, because they were completely shocked. Though my parents were absolutely fine with the decision, because my mom actually said, Purnima, you should do what you feel like doing, because I don't want you to have a regret later on. And I think somewhere in her mind, she knew that this girl was not cut out for like these heavy duty science labs. She knew me. So I think she knew, and in a sense, I think she endorsed the decision I made. But my teachers were very shocked. And they kept saying, you're making this wrong decision. You can always switch from science to something else, but you can't move into arts and commerce and decide you want to do science later, because our education system doesn't support that decision. It's easy for people to move from science to the rest of the streams. And
Yeah.
so they said, why do you want to block that? You could be a great engineer. And I said, yeah, I could, but I don't want to be. And I think that's where there was a lot of dilemma. And it was interesting you asked me this, because all my close friends in school, suddenly I was without them, because all of them moved into science, all of them. Like I had about 4 or 5 of them.
Wow.
And they would keep saying, why are you doing this? And, come on board and all of that. But I knew I probably I wouldn't enjoy it. And I think that was it. I guess that brings about an interesting thing that I want to also share was typically you tend to be more productive when you enjoy doing certain things. And if you really like science, then you'll go all out to read and browse and do all of that stuff. And I think the same worked for me, because when I was it's called economics and commerce, what I had taken, and it was interesting for me because I was learning about world economy. I was learning about while I was not doing math so much, but I was definitely doing accounting, something which is similar, and I enjoyed that. And even though I didn't know what I was in for, I think it was not so much of a surprise, and I actually enjoyed my senior years in school, and it was fun for me. So,
well, it sounds to me like you're a bit of a systems thinker.
Okay.
And that you if you get into something, you can understand the broader picture of how, going back to some of the services that Marlabs provides as a parallel, that you can see the broader picture. You can see how things fit in to different places. And if you're taking an econ and world business, I'm wondering if you saw, here's the function of marketing, here's the function of the sciences, here's the function of this, and this is kind of where I see myself. Was that, did that play out that way at all?
It played out, yes, but much, much later, Josh. I mean, you give me far too much credit for some kind of visionary thinking, but that really was not.
Okay.
I think the first, I would say almost a decade that I was in, like spent 2 decades, close to two and a half decades. So I would say the first 15 years was probably spent, honing myself and being the best, from a marketing standpoint. If I'm given a function or a task, then make sure that I do it really well. So I was very myopic, I would say, in that sense of being more of a functional specialist, without really bothering to understand, okay, how is this impacting my business at a larger scale? I was very happy doing everything that I was doing and getting the kudos from my boss, and that means I'm really a good worker. But I think it was much later that once I started, being a little bit more of a functional, I started wearing more of the organizational hat, thanks to my CMO roles, that I really started understanding that how important it is to look at, like you exactly said, look at the broad picture and not just look at the function that you're doing, but also be able to establish fungibilities with the other functions within the organization, to really understand what is the impact you have as not only as a functional leader, but an organizational leader, as well as as a marketing expert. What is the kind of skills that you can bring in? And I think once I started exploring that was when I truly, evolved, as you would say, to have a slightly more macro picture.
Yeah.
And also to move away from being a marketing expert to, I would say, quasi business leader, because I think there's so much more that you can play with and you can understand and you can contribute to when you wear that hat and stop looking at it from a very myopic functional lens. So that learning for me came much later, Josh, and probably the last, I would say, a decade or so, when I started honing those skills. And it didn't come overnight. It came by observing it. It also came by virtue of my role. I give you an example. I had picked up so one of the shifts, you talked about the pivotal shift. So one of the, I would say, risks I had taken was to move from a very large organization as head of marketing to a much smaller organization as a CMO. And one of the guiding principles, and it was actually given to me by one of my colleagues. He said that if your value curve and if your knowledge curve is growing, then it's not a risk, it's a reward for you. And in a sense,
Interesting. Yeah.
taking the CMO role, my knowledge curve was definitely going to rise, and my value curve had also risen because I was now, taking a C-suite or part of the executive team and so on. But what I didn't realize is that that move I was completely unprepared for the demands of that CMO role. And I jumped into the role thinking, okay, I'm such a good person at marketing, or I can do this role so well. It will be cakewalk for me. And it was not. It was actually quite a lot of relearning. And I remember one of the senior leaders coming to me and saying that, you're not a marketing person anymore. You need to understand that. And you have a lot more responsibility towards the organization than just saying, hey, I got these cool mentions in these reports, or, I did these cool events. And it took me a little bit of time to understand the impact of what he was saying. And that's when I realized that, yeah, it's not just a summation of, some transactional items, but you need to have a bigger understanding of the role and the impact of that role. So I think the knowledge was much gradual, and I think it was built upon probably in the last decade or so.
Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that. Yeah. Here's a thought. Do you think you would have applied for the CMO position had you known the challenge of learning and how it would look ultimately? Do you think because you said, hey, I'm confident, I can do this, I'm going to apply for this, I'm going to get into this. Yeah. So tell me what you think about that.
Wow, nobody's ever asked me that, Josh. That's a very interesting question. Would I have joined or taken up the new role? I think, okay, so here's how I'd like to answer it. I think the first risk that I took moving from this global multi-billion-dollar organization to being a CMO of the smaller organization was a risk in itself, because I was not sure whether the company will last. I wasn't sure what I was getting into. So I would say that I was ready to learn and learn more. But did I think that I will have to unlearn a lot of the marketing skills that I already thought I knew so well, and it would be cakewalk for me? No, I didn't think that. That was completely unexpected. So I was ready to take the risk. I was ready to see what 2-3 years of being in that role would give me. And I was quite sure. Okay, so the 2-3 guiding principles other than this as well. I was quite sure that once I get the CMO kind of title, sorry for being so, crude, but that would give me avenues to other leadership roles if I choose to step out of that organization after a few years. So I think it was the potential possibilities that excited me to the role. But I never once thought that I had to learn a lot of things. And had I known that it would be challenging, I might have taken a step or taken a longer time to decide. But I was definitely sure that I did want to take a risk and see whether I could step up to it, especially in terms of the role change and the fact that I was getting into completely unknown territory with this smaller organization. And whereas with the larger organization, I had spent a good 6-7 years, I was comfortable, I knew the leadership, I got promoted, and I was in a very comfortable state. And I just wanted to shake that a little bit and see if I was going to make any mark at all, I guess.
You seem to have a strong sense of self, and if you will, sort of a North Star that guides you. And this is not a visionary thing, but you know yourself, you know what you are capable of, you know your values and your strengths, and therefore you can take some risks and get into new situations and take on new challenges because of that internal confidence. Does that resonate at all?
It does, but again, it came much later, Josh. It was probably not when I started. I don't think I was, that confident. I was not always open, in a conflict situation. I very rarely opened my mouth or, put a contrarian point of view for the fear that it might be taken in the wrong. spirit, or I might come off the worse for that argument, or of that situation. So I would say that yes, the beginning I was not, I don't think I was. I knew I was a good person when it came. I knew I was a good professional when it came to communications. I knew I was good at what I did. But being a leader and growing up in your career demands a lot more of other skills. Your ability to network, your ability to understand the fabric of the organization, your ability to go beyond the obvious, your ability to go, with gut sometimes, and the ability to look at facts and also go with a sense of gut. And so I think all those pieces came in much later, or I would say it was fairly evolutionary. Like I mentioned, I was very happy with my little marketing success and winning awards and doing these cool events. But I think it was much later when I had to take these important steps to understand. And I also saw people around me who were also encouraging me to do some of these things. So I also attribute a lot of my learning to some really good managers and peers who have advised me, and they've done that. And it's interesting. Most of them, I think, throughout my entire life, my managers were almost always men. And it's interesting that I've had far more great, good, I would say, experiences where they've encouraged me. And I've not seen anyone saying, put me down as such, like, oh, this is not for you and somebody else can do it. So I've been very fortunate that way. In fact, there have been some very interesting incidents where my previous bosses, one of my bosses, actually threw me into a difficult situation, and just I had to swim all out of it. And that was interesting, very, very interesting. And one of the most, I would say, at that point in time, I was frustrated. I was angry at him, and why did he put me through that situation? But in hindsight, I was probably very blessed, and I think that situation taught me so much about dealing with people. Yeah. So I think again, like, to answer your question, I think all these learnings come over a period of time. I definitely was not that confident to start with, but yeah, it probably over a period of time, with all the experiences, I realized that one can make the change, and it starts within you, I guess. So if you're confident, then I think you kind of exude that, and then you're able to challenge, inspire others to do the same thing.
Absolutely. Let's center on that just for a moment, on the conflict piece, because you mentioned that earlier on, perhaps more conflict avoidant, not wanting to stir up trouble. Can you talk about the difference between quite a while ago, and your approach to conflict, and now your approach to conflict?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I would say I was a conscious conflict avoider, in the beginning part of my career. And I like things to be very harmonious. And if there was a conflict, then maybe I should just say okay to the other party, and, just get things sorted out.
Sure.
It was a little, I was not very comfortable, I would say. And it used to kind of bother me that we had conflicts in the first place. So I would say there was internally, I was not able to understand that the essence of successful organizations is actually to have conflicts. I mean, you should have different points of views. So initially, it was definitely a challenge. And also, Josh, I was working in organizations with predominantly men. And again, this is India. This is, I would say, early 2000s. So there were opinions, and there were opinions. And so one had to be very, very strong of oneself and have a lot of facts to be able to stand up to those opinions. And I would say I didn't think I was ready then. But I did have, and you learn and you also observe. So I moved into a couple of organizations. Actually, this interesting organization that I moved into, which was very multicultural. And I used to meet up with a lot of people from Australia and China. And, so we were in Asia Pacific. So I was part of the Asia Pacific team. And I noticed something very interesting, that the folks from Australia always had a point of view which was different. And they always spoke their mind. And saw India and I saw China, and we were like, okay, we were not putting ourselves in the conflict zone. I didn't mean to generalize, but this was just an experience. It's my
How it worked
experience.
out. Yeah. Mhm.
And I realized that a lot of this is also cultural. I mean, we are as a nation or as a society, probably we are told not to get into conflicts too much for our own good, and so a lot of us don't vocalize our dissonance as much. Uh, but now things have changed. I think with the one is that I think we ourselves has evolved. I think people who are working, for the last 20 odd years, we are seeing that change. But also the generation now, they're far more vocal. They know exactly what they want, and they don't hesitate to speak their mind. It's also cultural conditioning. It's also the millennial syndrome. Call it what you may, but it is what it is. So. So
Yeah.
I did notice that, and I was, I guess those were my early observations. That when I used to get into these conversations, I would look at these Aussie women, and they were like, boom, boom, boom. They would just, challenge the authority. They would challenge our CMO, and they would say, "No, you're wrong." And you would wonder, "Oh my God, how is she saying that? And how are they saying that?" So a lot of it is also probably cultural, but I think things have changed. And now, when I look at conflict, I look at it as a necessary part of my being within my organization. Even for my own team, I expect people to challenge me, because if I say something and that's taken as for what it is, then we're not growing as an organization. So I always welcome people to have different points of view, and I make it a point to ask people in my team as well, are you agreeing with me, or do you have a different point of view? And I think that brings up, sometimes it's very interesting, Josh. Sometimes the most quietest people, when they're asked for an opinion, give you an opinion that is so damn rich and so different to what you're thinking, that you're really better off for having that conversation with the person. So I would say that I definitely welcome contrarian opinions. Yes, there is a lot of conflict that happens. I try to vocalize. And one of the things that I've also learned, Josh, is to look at it from the other person's point of view. And I think that's helped me a lot as to why somebody else is saying what they're saying in a conflict situation, and also try and see it through their lens. And sometimes that helps as well. The third thing that I've also understood is empathy for the situation, obviously, because I'm coming with my point of view and so are others. So the need for empathy then rises a lot more. These are things which I probably picked up over a period of time. I was not equipped with it when we started. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it made sense, but
That makes
that's
perfect
been my
sense.
journey.
Yeah. It sounds like you've really grown in your valuing of conflict.
Yes.
And understanding of the kind of the function of conflict. Yeah, that's profound and has such a huge impact on leadership. I'd love to work with you. You're the kind of person I like. Absolutely. And well, because that approach, it creates an atmosphere that is inclusive, and
Yeah.
at least more inclusive for sure.
And Josh, I have to thank my teams, my previous teams, and my managers. And like I said, most of them, actually all of them, have been so encouraging, so inclusive of me and a lot of my peers, that that's the very least I could learn from them when I am thrown into situations. So I have a lot to thank my previous managers for sure. A lot of them have really guided the way I think about business and the way I think about people and teams and my own self-worth. So it's a shout out to all of them all through this interview, Josh.
Absolutely. Yeah, we will. If you want me to tag anybody, I'm happy to do so in the show notes. That would be fun.
Sure.
Yeah. Can you comment on your perspective on the state of women in professions in India?
India?
Yeah, and broader, because I know you have given some thought to those issues, and just for me and for our audience members, some context for the way things look right now. What is the landscape currently, and perhaps what was the landscape a few years back, and what are your hopes going forward?
Sure. Okay, so let me start with my era, which is a good 20-25 odd years from now. Honestly, we didn't have a playbook of what leadership or what professionalism would look like. I mean, all we had were transcripts of what we've heard our fathers or male colleagues. And the fundamental difference that I still feel is that men share a lot more of their work. they have a bad day, they kind of hit the bar and, just have a few drinks and they just throw it out. That's it. Women, we tend to internalize it so much more. We don't share it. We think, oh, it's our fault. Oh, we had this issue. Now I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'm not that great a professional. So we internalize so much of it in our heads. It's very unfortunate. And at least, at least in my generation, we didn't have a very acceptable playbook. I keep saying playbook because I thought it's much easier for men to vocalize some of this and just get on with their lives. That was one. We didn't have too many of I would say peers, or I would say leaders, women leaders to look up to, other than a few political leaders or a few folks. So we didn't have like a kind of peer sharing, exchange, knowledge sharing kind of. There was nothing. So we all had to, and kudos to all the women who've been working for the last, I would say, 3 decades, because it's really tough. And in India, like I said, people hadn't still warmed up to taking orders from women, or having women bosses. And I think it came over with a period of time. So I think the early years, I did have a few people that I looked up to. I'm not sure if I should say their names, but one of the women was one of the leaders of our then. She was leading operations for Indian Airlines. Indian Airlines is the largest public sector carrier for India. And I was working, as an advertising agency, I was working for Indian Airlines, and she happened to be my client. And what I loved about her was just the way that she managed her entire workforce, which was largely men. And you could see that, she was struggling, but she did hold her, she was very strong, very firm, very opinionated. And at the same time, very much a people's person as well, because she helped me out in, in a few things when I was stuck up in some difficult situations. But so we had very few, I would say, leaders that we could look up to, and very few. So we would always, whoever we had, we would just try and take the best from our interactions with them and try and see if we could learn something from them. That situation has changed so much, thanks to internet, thanks to, this whole world becoming such a global, local world. I would say there is just no dearth of knowledge. There's no dearth of playbooks. So women today, I would say, are far more luckier. The opportunities are huge. Our mindset, there's a huge mindset shift. And I would say it's a 180-degree shift, especially in the cities where it's not taboo. Women are encouraged. There's absolutely no qualms about the kind of profession that you want to take, whether it's IT, whether you want to be in construction, whether you want to set your own enterprise. There is absolutely no I think it's a sea change, and it's a very, very welcome change. And we see a lot more of women participating. But yes, I think the numbers still don't add up. We still have very limited representation in the, I would say, C-suite or in the higher kind of management cadres. It's still a little bit of different situation there. Also, things about like women returning back after a hiatus. I think that we as a society still need to accept that and be able to give opportunities. And actually, my firm does a lot in that space, which has also given me an opportunity to see a lot of the colleagues that I work on a regular basis are women who've come back after a break. And, it's just very refreshing to see that works just as well. You don't have to be working. You can always take a break and then come back, and you can just be as productive. So I think things today have changed, though the numbers still need to stack up a bit more. But I think the access to information, the access to peer networks, the access to training, the access to playbooks, is a lot more today than probably what I had, or my parents had. In fact, my mom wanted to work, and she did work for a brief period of time, but she had to then quit work because my sister was unwell, and so she had to quit her job to take care of the two of us. So things have changed. I mean, and it's not just women. I think men, everyone's supportive. The men today are extremely supportive, and I've seen that in marriage situations and work situations. I think the biggest shifts that I have seen have come from them, and I think that's what allows, I think, women to do more and to break more barriers. And I think we have a lot to thank our male colleagues for, and have to give them a lot more credit than we have.
That's a lot that is going on. that's really hopeful. That's really positive, and it sounds like the base is shifting,
Yes.
and it may take more time for, as you mentioned, the C-suite and the executive leadership numbers to catch up. But it sounds like the base is shifting, and that's a big
Yes,
deal.
and yes,
So
it
hopeful.
is. Yes, we have still have a long way when it comes to the rest of India.
Yeah.
I'm talking about an India which is much smaller. We're just talking about a few cities, and
Mhm.
but the situation is still, I would say, changing, and there's a lot more that we should do. But
Mm.
um, it's definitely not what it was 25 years ago, for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. What are some final thoughts that you have with regard to women in leadership? Any words of advice that you would like to give beyond what you've given? I mean, this has been a rich discussion so far, and I'm so grateful that you've taken the time. And I've definitely benefited, and I'm looking forward to the comments that we will get and responses from our audience. Any final things that you want to offer from your experience, from your thoughts on women in leadership in general?
Um, it's been a, and I wouldn't say it's a tough journey, but it's a very rewarding and enriching experience once you decide to embark on the journey. So I would really encourage every person to be aspiring for it. Doesn't really matter, what career stream you've taken. It doesn't matter that you're coming back after a break. If you really are keen to move ahead in your career, then a few things that I think that has worked well, or rather, I have benefited, is one is really network. And I didn't
Mhm.
do that in the early part of my career because I was so sure that I was doing such a good job of my work, and what did I need to network for? But I
Yeah.
realized later on that how important it is to have different be part of different spheres of network, not only to expand your future potential, but also to learn, to share your knowledge, to be visible. So that's one.
Mhm. Mhm.
The second one I would say is, please build a brand, both within the organization and outside, and use the tools that are available for you to
Hmm.
build a brand. And you don't have to model your brand on anything but who you are. Like, my brand is all about having fun at work. It's humor, and a lot of that is
Mhm.
reflected in what I write
Mhm.
and how I speak and things like that. So just create your brand and work towards enriching your brand and making sure that the brand is amplified, because you could be very good at what you do, but it doesn't go too far if people don't know who you are and what you do. So you have to
Mhm.
invest in creating that brand, which is not too far from who you are, and it should be very close to who you are, actually.
Hmm.
The third is, I would say, never stop learning. And even for me, there's just so much happening that I feel, oh, I don't know anything, when it comes to marketing. Now we're talking about analytics, we're talking about tools, we're talking about,
Mhm.
all kinds of things, which sometimes I have to lean into my team because they know it far, far more better than I ever will. So please invest in learning. And the last thing I would say is, don't take yourself so seriously, have fun.
Be
Life's too
goofy.
short, and just have fun, because sometimes I think we get so caught up in our own internal struggles that we forget to have fun. So I think having fun is most important. Even if it's a bad day, it's okay to pass, but just enjoy, have fun, and enjoy what you're doing, and but do it with passion.
Purnima, this has been fun. Thank you so much for taking the time. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoy you.
Thank you so much, Josh, for giving me the opportunity. And I've seen some of the videos that you have done with the previous women who have come on your show, and it's so enriching to hear them. And I feel very humbled that you chose me to be part of that elite group. And so thank you so much. And yeah, I wish you all the luck.
Thank you so much. We'll talk real soon.
Thanks. Bye.
All
See
right.
you.